With so many Spider-Man villains, it's hard to pick the best. However, there are those that seem like they wouldn't be much of a threat, but when you look at it logically, are absolutely terrifying. And those villains are what we're exploring today. Greetings, Nerd Squad, and welcome back to Top 10 Nerd. I'm Connor Monroe, and this is the top 10 most powerful Spider-Man villains you wouldn't expect. Let's do it. In a 10, shocker. Herman Schultz's parents died when his younger brother Marty was a boy. From a young age, Schultz turned to a life of crime. However, he soon realized that he wasn't really good at it, having been arrested several times. After one robbery gone wrong, he got arrested again, but was sent to a prison workshop, where he used the resources around him to build gauntlets that sent out shock waves which quickly opened safes as well, giving himself a one-up on the authorities, a much needed one. Now I know what you're thinking, but how could a guy named Herman be any form of powerful? Well, the Shocker had the ability to shock his enemies with his handheld vibro shock units. But because the vibrations were so fierce, he wore a heavily insulated suit, and during his first outing as the self-styled Shocker, he ran into and defeated Spider-Man. Plus, I mean, he's the Shocker. He shocks people. In at 9, Hydro Man. Morris Bench was born and raised in the Bronx, New York. He began working as a crewman on a cargo ship, but he was accidentally knocked overboard by Spider-Man while a powerful experimental generator was being lowered into the ocean for testing. Exposed to the energy conversion process of the generator while being bombarded with volcanic gas, Bench's cellular structure was altered. When he was rescued from the depths, though, his body began extruding great quantities of some watery substance, which Bench first attributed to just being sweat. Annoyed by the incessant dripping, Bench went to a local pub to stir up trouble, finding none, but he was astonished to learn that he could convert his entire physical form into basically water. While he may just be a form of Sandman, being able to convert to water instead of sand, he certainly seems more powerful to me. There is water basically everywhere, and our bodies are made of 70% water, so if Bench was able to tap into the water that is in his enemies' bodies, that would be a freaking nightmare. Not to mention a horrible sight. In at 8, the Kingpin. A crime boss is one thing. A crime boss that to the public is a well-respected philanthropist and businessman is something else. Especially a businessman who is like 300 pounds of muscle. Wilson Fisk is an absolute madman who runs most of the New York and Las Vegas criminal underworld. However, things get even more intense after his wife is killed so that he doesn't retire. After the murder of his wife, not only did he resume leadership of his former organization, but he also turned over the files on other criminal leaders to law enforcement through the costumed crime fighter of Daredevil, now with the motive of ridding himself of any rivals, and the ploy actually worked, and as a result of the evidence in the files, many crime leaders, both inside and outside the Magia, were convicted. In the ensuing power vacuum, the Kingpin rebuilt his coalition stronger than before. He moved on to control a great majority of non-Magia East Coast gangs dealing in conventional crimes, and the Kingpin's organization became stronger than any single Magia family in the New York area could ever withstand. We love a savvy businessman. And at 7, Spidercide. Spidercide is a more obscure and odd Spider-Man villain that I still think would give the hero a run for his money nowadays. Being first introduced as Spidercide in New Warriors number 61, this version of Peter Parker is one of the clones made by Dr. Miles Warren, an entirely separate villain that caused the whole clone debacle and the introduction of Ben Reilly and the Scarlet Spider. But what's notable about Spidercide is not only him having all of Spider-Man's powers, but also the ability to stretch and warp his body at will, similar to Mr. Fantastic. Spidercide is certainly deadly as well, helping Jackal to release a virus in Springfield, Pennsylvania, which resulted in the deaths of over 2,600 people, which Homer Simpson was definitely not happy about. But either way, Spidercide, with all the abilities of Spider-Man and Mr. Fantastic, makes him pretty damn powerful for a villain that not really many people know about. And at 6, Kraven the Hunter. Karanoff found that he had a great talent for finding employment in Kenya, Africa. Karanoff began his career using the typical tools of the hunter, but over time he developed a preference to take down large animals with his bare hands. So, you know, already a psycho in the making. After meeting a voodoo witch doctor named Calypso, Karanoff took a herbal potion which enhanced his physical powers and gave him strength, speed, and senses to match a jungle cat. The potion also extended his life greatly, keeping his health and vitality for years to come. At some point, the notion of big game hunting became a bore to the hunter, so his associate Chameleon, who was later revealed to be his half half-brother, proposed to Kraven that he hunt Spider-Man, and thus gave Kraven a new purpose in life. Kraven gained additional powers by drinking more rare and exotic jungle elixirs given to him by his voodoo priestess lover Calypso. These elixirs gave him the strength and speed of a savage beast, and all the better to catch Spider-Man with, right? Despite being assisted by the Chameleon, his scheme failed and he was deported from the US, but he would definitely come back. Halfway through into number 5, Toxin. Born from Carnage as the 1000th symbiote in its lineage, Toxin was feared to be the strongest and most dangerous of their race by both Venom and Carnage. Shortly after being born, the symbiote united with police officer Pat Mulligan. Years later, the symbiote was removed from Mulligan by Blackheart, who beat Pat Mulligan to death in a gutter. With the help of Venom, Jack-o'-lantern took it to its boss, Crime Master. Crime Master, though, found the perfect host in Eddie Brock, who he forced to become Toxin's host. You know, Eddie Brock, the former host of Venom. After bonding with Eddie, Toxin took over its host and worked with the Savage Six, attacking its grandfather symbiote Venom. And with Toxin seemingly coming to the big screen in the future, being introduced in Let There Be Carnage, okay, well, Pat Mulligan was introduced, and then he had some like freaky thing happen with his eyes near the end of the movie, but still, it's very close to it. This guy is also just a freaking freak, okay? He can grow fangs and claws when he's angry. It just happens. It's not something that he thinks of, it just happens. Something that Venom and Carnage are unable to do. However, Toxin is also unable to be tracked by Venom or Carnage, as well as being immune to Spider-Man's spider sense. So this dude is hella off the radar, which only makes things freakier. And in 4, Anti-Venom. When Eddie Brock separated from the Venom symbiote, traces of it were still left in his body. Later though, suffering from cancer, Brock started working as a volunteer in the Feast Center. Martin Lee, the founder of Feast, and the alter ego of the supervillain Mr. Negative, used his powers to cure Eddie's cancer. But in the process, Lee accidentally infused the remnants of the symbiote in Eddie's bloodstream with his power, and fused them to his white blood cells, creating a new hybrid symbiote which manifested when the Venom symbiote attempted to leave its then current host Matt Gargan and return to Eddie. This new symbiote, dubbed Anti-Venom by Eddie, demonstrated tremendous healing powers and other powers that differ from the Venom symbiote, as well as having an inverted color scheme, or a negative color scheme, if you will, such as producing antibodies that can cure any known disease and removing any other impurities within a human body. Unlike other symbiotes though, this symbiote is completely mindless, and Eddie Brock is in full control of its actions. This symbiote was destroyed when it was used as the cure for the spider virus, which had turned various characters into human spider hybrids. However, it was remade as Agent Anti-Venom after Flash Thompson ended up getting soaked with anti-venom serum. That's a whole other story. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Shathra. An inhabitant of the astral plane, Shathra is the spider wasp to Peter Parker's spider. She learned of Spider-Man when he strayed from the safe path during a visit to the astral plane to locate the interdimensional kidnapper known as the Shade. Shathra immediately realized Spider-Man's true nature and determined that he would make the perfect meal for her hungry young hatchlings. Great! First introduced in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2 number 46 in 2002, Shathra quickly followed Spider-Man's scent back to Earth. She engaged Spider-Man in a battle that demonstrated her clearly superior speed and strength, but Spider-Man was able to use his superior knowledge of New York City to find temporary escape. But of course he only knew that it was a matter of time before Shathra would locate him once more. Shathra turned the game in a new direction though, changing to a human form and adopting the name Sharon Keller. And she went on TV to pose as Spider-Man's jitted lover. She went on TV and revealed a series of convincing and humiliating details, and of course this made Mary Jane upset. So, spurred on by Mary Jane's distress, Peter rose to the taunt. He gatecrashed the studio interview and attacked Sharon Keller in full view of, live TV. Shathra reverted to her Spider-Wasp form, but her gambit had achieved its goal of pushing Spider-Man to act on pure instinct, which ended up making him the prey, because they were at their actual primordial positions. He was the prey, she was the hunter because she's the spider wasp. You get it, you get it. But ultimately, in at number 2, Chameleon. Being the first villain Spider-Man ever faced way back in Amazing Spider-Man number 1 from 1963 and my costume from yesterday, I think that Chameleon is a more underrated villain than he should be. Being able to look like anyone at any time is pretty damn overpowered, especially when you can use it to look like Spider-Man and even use suction cups to stick to walls, even if it's slightly unrealistic. This character is especially powerful when he has superpowers, like in the 90s animated Spider-Man series, where after Alistair Smythe infused him with a techno-organic virus, could simply look at you and end up transforming into you. It's actually insanely overpowered when you look at it like that, since he can also transform his clothes. He could be fleeing from Spider-Man and turn the corner and then be anyone, so it's certainly someone to fear, unless they use the original version who has to use disguises and makeup to look like anyone they want, since that process takes time and can't be turned on and off. And finally, in at number 1, the Spot. As a scientist working for the Kingpin, Dr. Owen was assigned to reproduce the radiation levels of the vigilante Cloak to find a way to artificially mimic his powers. Working late one night, he succeeded, creating a solid black circular portal. In doing so, however, the drain on the city's power became so great that a blackout washed over the city, causing the portal to shimmer and destabilize. Fearful of losing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Owen stepped into it, and the power shortage caused the portal to send him to a different dimension, a place of half darkness and half light. When Owen emerged back into his lab, his body had undergone a radical transformation. The portals from the other dimension had adhered to his skin, covering him with black spots from head to toe. The reason this is absolutely terrifying, and is the most overpowered villain you wouldn't expect, is because he now had the ability to control these portals. If the man wanted to decapitate you, he easily could. Just close a portal at any part of your body, and then boom, amputation. Around your neck, you're dead. It's horrifying. Spider-Man in the 90s cartoon would use these portals to land a punch on Owen, but if Owen just decided to close it or he lost his focus to keep them open, that would have been real bad. Just stay away from this guy, straight up. Don't even try to fight him. There we have it, friends, the top 10 most powerful Spider-Man villains you wouldn't expect. It's a good thing I'm wearing this costume today because that worked out well. I was supposed to film this tomorrow and I would have adjusted something else, so it's good. Thank you all so much for watching. I have been and shall remain Colin Monroe, and I'll see you in another video.